So you want to play D&D, but you don't even know how. You don't know anyone that does play, maybe in your friends group, or maybe you have a group of friends that do want to play, but no one to DM. Being the dungeon master, the person that creates the world. But how do we create that world? This is part one of an ongoing series in which we discuss this kind of stuff. The first thing you have to do is you have to decide where you're going to play this game. For me, there's three answers to this, and you get to choose one and then go from there. The first one is create your own world. Create everything from the ground up. I think that personally is the most rewarding thing as a dungeon master. Create this world in your mind and have your players play around in it. And it's a great feeling. It's what I do with my players. It's what we're doing right now, and I'll tell you all about my world as time goes on. But not everyone has time for that. For those that don't have time, pre-existing worlds do exist in the form of modules. The Curse of Strahd, for example. Basically a vampire messes with you and the party the entire time, and you kind of follow the directions, and it's a nice book, and it takes you through levels 1 through 10, and you can continue going on from that point if you'd like, or you can end the campaign at level 10, which is a good long campaign, don't get me wrong, that's plenty of time. But for me, I want something that has the possibility to, if they don't all die, and I don't kill them, or I do a good job and they want to come back, of going on up into, the high teens into the level 20 and beyond. The third option, the option I least subscribe to, but does have elements in both 1 and 2, and that is just wing it. You can literally do no prep, sit down at a table with your friends, have some dice, have them have some characters, which again we'll talk about later. If you don't know how to do characters, we'll have a whole thing on that. And just make it up as you go. I find that to be really hard, but if you are maybe you're a person that really knows D&D, or really knows monsters in general, or really knows tabletop RPGs, you could conceivably just make it up as you go. That said, I don't recommend it. Specifically, the problem is when you want your players to sit down with you, you want their suspension of disbelief to start immediately once you begin talking, once you set the stage, once you are like, oh, you enter a tavern, 5 weary travelers, and suddenly the door bursts open, and a man bloodied falls on the floor. And then you start your adventure. That's fine, that's great. But what do you do after that? It leads to inconsistencies. If you're not taking any notes or writing down, or a bartender's name may be Bob, and the next time they go in, it's Jim, and then they're like, wasn't his name Bob? Someone remembers. And then you go, oh, yeah, it's Bob Jim, or something. It takes out the, I don't know, theater of the mind, if you will. So for this, we're going to go with the first option, which is create your own world from the ground up. It's what I do. My world's name is Kador, Kadoor. I don't even remember how I got that name, but often what I'll do, if I can't think of a name for something, I'll think of what that thing represents, like maybe world, and then I'll look at different translations of that in different languages, and I'll find a word that sounds cool or part of a word that sounds cool. And like Hebrew often offers some pretty cool and interesting names. There's also fantasy name generators. I'll put a bunch of stuff down in the doobly-doo. But it doesn't matter. You could play on Earth if you'd like. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. You don't have to make it up. You could also, there's plenty of worlds already out there. If you just want to look up D&D world map or something, I guarantee you there's plenty of free PDFs and printable sheets that you could use and just play from there, and then you don't even have to make the map. But if you're like me, and you're a little bit of a control freak, and you have a lot of creativity, at least you think you're creative, and you want to get it out, the best way is to build it yourself. So the first question I ask myself is, what do I want the players to experience? And my answer to that was a bunch of shit. So it's not just going to be a single biome, that's what we know right away, unless it's a bunch of shit in a jungle. It could be a jungle planet, who cares? It could take place on Pandora, and you could rip off James Cameron, who cares? It could also take place on Hoth. It could take place anywhere. But I wanted something more, I don't know, even more diverse than like Middle Earth and Lord of the Rings, which is pretty much just mountainous Seattle. So I went for a bunch of different biomes, and the way I decided to do it was just go on Donjon, which again is down in the doobly-doo, and you can create a world map with all sorts of stuff on it. And it's just randomly generated. There's seed numbers. You can basically put whatever you want into it, and something always pops out. Now, you might not like the first, second, or even 15th option that comes up, but just press generate on that and do random and see what happens. Eventually, something you're going to see is good. Maybe it's an island in the middle of somewhere, and then all around is ocean, and then on the edges is more continents. That could be cool, because now you have a small area to play with at the beginning, and then maybe outside of that, maybe you can say, oh, that's the wildlands, that's uninhabited. And then they have to charter a boat or steal a boat or make a boat, a ship even, across, and then they can go explore these untamed lands. So it's no longer kings and bandits and all that shit. It's dragons and trolls and orcs. That's interesting. Could also be maybe undead is outside that, and this is the only place where any living thing happens. D&D is very famous for having many different planes of existence. So for instance, mine is just a multiverse. It's not different planes on which things definitely exist. It's a multiverse in which things may exist. For instance, there's, I don't know, the lands of fire or something, or lands of ice, and you can have different demons and stuff running around. In my world, that's not really the case. It's a universe in where demons is the natural order of things. That's the place in which they live and just have always lived, and it's normal for that universe to exist. But for you, it could be a plane of existence, just like Dungeon Master's Guide tells you. You can absolutely use that. That's no big deal. Another question you have to ask yourself is basically, where do we want the campaign to start? And this could have many different answers. For instance, you could use the modules that I referenced earlier. Some of them are free. Some of them you can buy. I know Wizards of the Coast, who makes D&D, offers plenty of them. But you could also find them all over the internet. So there'll be some links down in the description if you want to. You could also use the modules to pepper your map with different cities and stuff. So just get 3 or 4, select few up front, just to maybe outside your initial area, or one of them is definitely the starting town, and then just run modules in a world that you have made, but the modules serve as sort of the adventures. That's absolutely fine. You can cobble this together however you like, and if you happen to come up with a cool idea in the middle or in between these modules, do it. But what do? Everything's from scratch, because I'm a dork. Now, I have a lot more time than some people. I work at home, I do YouTube for a living, and I don't work a 9 to 5, 40 plus hours a week. So I have time to kind of sit and think. I have time to sit and write if I'd like to. I have time to paint minis, and I have, time to plan. Some people only have a weekend, and some people play every week, and that's fine. Some people only play every month, and if you play every month, like once a month, even every other week, I think you ought to try to put more time into it, because the more you put into it, the better your experience will be. And in my opinion, a good session of D&D is the only place you can get that itch scratched as far as role-playing games are concerned. It's a different experience. If I want to play a video game, those are absolutely great choices. Divinity 2 is a great idea, which, by the way, has like a dungeon mastery mode now, which I will not sink any time into because it would eat me. There's nothing like sitting at a table and not knowing what's going to happen, because you're not the only player. And as a DM, you're not even a player usually, and I don't recommend you are. We can talk about that one day as a DM that's also a player. I just think seeing what 4, 5, 6 people are going to do and adapting to that situation is the best part about DMing in D&D. And next you might think, okay, but how does it end? It doesn't matter how it ends. The idea here is that you are the DM and this is your world, but it's not your story. You can have elements of the story, and certainly you have input, and of course you have the threads that the story will kind of dance on. But you're here for the players. The goal should not be, I'm a DM, I want to tell my story. It should be, I'm a DM, I want them to tell me a story. Because that's really what it's about. You want the players to have as much input in the story as possible without them knowing what's coming. So for instance, a tool I used recently is I gave my players a handout and I asked them questions about their character. The most important question being, why did you show up at the hub city? The hub city's name is Gygax. Wink. Gary Gygax is the creator of Dungeons & Dragons, if you don't know. So I named my main city Gygax. And I got a lot of really good, interesting answers from my players. And I also asked them about their personal relationships. What does their home look like? What are their favorite foods, activities, stuff like that? And this did two things. Number one, for me, it just gives me cool stuff to write and to kind of add to the story as flavor that, oh, the characters know, oh, my favorite food is here, I should buy my favorite food. It helps with roleplay, which, by the way, can be a tough bit of ice to break at first for some people. But we can, again, in another video, talk about how to get people to roleplay. It gave them role-playing cues, and I think that's the most important. It lets them have their character and make it sort of ruminate in their mind, so the character becomes not this avatar they pick up and press buttons on a video game. Like, no one goes and plays Super Mario Odyssey and thinks, I am Mario. You think, I'm playing Mario. But when they sit down at my table, they're their characters now. They're role-playing as their characters. They're thinking like their characters. And sometimes, sure, you'll break immersion every once in a while. There'll be some banter. That's fine. However you want to run your table is how you run your table. But it should serve the story when we're actually playing. So yeah, you don't need to know how the story's going to end. You don't even have to know who the bad guy is yet. But I do suggest having a calendar of events. What I did is I know that they're going to start here, and in so many days, X is going to happen. It could be a world-shattering event. The world could crack in two. You could also get shot back in time to a time before peace. Anything could happen. A king could just ask you. It could be a normal, standard story. You could even rip off Lord of the Rings. Here's the one ring of power. Let's go take it to Mordor. That's absolutely fine. And we can talk about styles of play like that. Like, colloquially, this is called murder hobos, where you just run through the countryside and murder whatever comes in your way and just grab loot. If that's something you and your party would have fun doing, absolutely do that. But that's not me. And that's why I have the calendar. Another thing I did is you have to have a pantheon of gods. Now, some places you can absolutely avoid gods altogether. I know some people aren't religious. I'm not religious. You can have one god. There's definitely things in the Dungeon Master's Guide that allow you to play with any number of gods, including 0. But I like to play with them. I think it adds a little bit of flavor. I think it's interesting to live in a world in which gods actively manipulate the planet. It's kind of got an Elder Scrolls feel to it, where it's some gods are more present than others, and that's fine, but I made up my own gods. You can use whatever pantheon of gods you like. You can use the old Nordic gods. You can use current Indian gods for Hindu. You can use just one god. You can use the Greco-Roman gods. It really doesn't matter. As long as it's something that you find interesting and would add flavor to the game. Don't do stuff that's just pulp. If you make a god or something that important, make it have personality. Write down, like, okay, what is it called, first of all? And again, if you just want to come up with anything, that's fine. I used fantasy name generators, or I looked up words for different things and got translations for them and just stole those words, and that's absolutely fine. Turns out, no one in my group knows how to speak Pashto, and that helps me, because then I can just use a cool Pashto word. But don't make them just like, oh yeah, that's the god of death. He kills stuff. Nah, tell me about him. What's he look like? What's she look like? Where do they hang out? Do they have followers? What are their followers' names? Do they have different levels to those followers? Like, is it just altar boy, singer, priest, or what do we got here? What do we got going on? For instance, Lathander is a god, I believe, in the Dragonlance thing. That's what my girlfriend uses for her cleric. It's the only one I stole straight up. Everyone else I made up because she had a character she wanted to carry over into this campaign. I was like, yeah, sure. Lathander has things like Dawn Lord, Dawn Bringer, Morning Lord, Dawn Star, stuff like that. And those are kind of hierarchies of religious priests or clerics in that order. And I think that's cool. What are the churches called? Are they just called churches? Or are they called mosques? Or are they called something else? For instance, I have one god called Isolfa, and she is the goddess of bounty. And bounty in any way. It doesn't just have to be farming or money or anything like that. It can be bounty in literally anything. A bounty of friendship, a bounty of family, a bounty of love. But her churches aren't churches. Her churches are silos. And in those silos, people put offerings of thanks. that represent the bounty they received in the last year. So if you have a bounty of family, you don't put your kid in there, but maybe you put a picture of them, or an article of clothing, or a favorite toy, or maybe a love letter that you write anonymously to your loved one. That's all cool. Of course, you could drop a bag of gold and some corn in there. That's fun. But I like the idea of opening up to the players, because the Bountiful Day is actually coming up in our campaign. What are they going to put in the silo? I don't know yet. I'm very excited to find out, though. I also have in the Bountiful Day celebration, it's kind of a mix between Christmas and Thanksgiving, because you also give people gifts. And you can do this however you want. Some people give whole families gifts. Some people give like Secret Santa sort of thing, where they pick names and then give each other gifts. But they also do a thing where it starts out from this main city and it works its way out, and you basically surf loosely different parties, and you eat, and you just kind of eat as much as you can, kind of like people do on Thanksgiving, where they're like, oh, I'm going to go to my family, then her family, then my grandma's house, then my aunt's house. So you eat 4 times on Thanksgiving. It's kind of like that, only it takes days. So I'm interested to see what they do. I have no idea what they're going to do. So think of holidays too. That's important. Of course, again, you don't need these things. I just think they flavor up your world and make it feel alive. Another important aspect: NPCs, non-player characters. You need these. This is how you build your world. Every time you go to a place with your players, what's it called? Why is it called that? The players may never know this, but if you know this, you can kind of get a feeling. Who's there? Who lives there? Is it all humans all the time? Is there a mixture? Is there more humans than elves? Are there elves and humans in about an equal dispersion? Are there no humans at all? Is it just full of orcs? Does anyone in your party speak Orcish? This could be an interesting roleplay aspect if nobody in the party speaks the language of the town they're supposed to go to for an adventure. That could be interesting. Who knows? Or a town full of only women, or only men, or only children. You could just do whatever you want. Why are the players there? Is the adventure there, or did they stumble upon this place? What are they going to do while they are there? These are interesting. You could wing it, of course. That's absolutely a possibility. You never know what your players are going to do. Now, it's your job to kind of guide them, but I don't think putting your players on rails, unless they're brand new, is good. And now some people may disagree. Don't put your players on rails ever. I think you don't put them on rails, you put them on the railway yard and let them pick a track and make sure that track loops back to a main hub and then make it loop back again. That's what I did for my players up front for about 5 sessions, because most of them, all of them, were new except for one. And it worked out. They get freedom in pockets for a little bit, and they can do whatever they want. But I know that at some point, there's going to be an event, and it's going to be near the players. Now, how they deal with that event is absolutely up to them. So, yeah, that's an example of kind of the world I've built. And I'd like to know down in the comments how you go about building your world. I think absolutely it's worth building from the ground up, but you have to know what's your place called, what's it look like, what are the biomes, what are they going to do in this world, and what's the story that you want to tell with them. At least part of the story, because it's not all your story. Again, it's their story too. And you don't have to know how it ends until you get close to the end. But you absolutely can. You can absolutely know who the last big fight's going to be with, and you can always funnel towards that direction. But it doesn't have to be that. So I hope this was helpful. This is going to be part 1 in a multi-part series. I know I'm kind of all over the place at times, but it's such a wide discussion that we need to start big and hone in on different facets of this. So this is going to be a lot of fun, I think. Down in the comments, let me know what you want to talk about next time, and we'll decide. I have a few ideas about the next episode, maybe how to roll characters, how to successfully navigate your first session as a DM, maybe how to balance monster encounters, how to do stuff outside. But I think one of the more interesting ones is, what do we want to run, roleplay or combat? So that's going to be probably the next episode of this. Do we roleplay or do we kill shit? Anyway, guys, if you liked it, please give me a like. Definitely consider subscribing to Unpopular Culture, where we do all sorts of shit, not just D&D. And, of course, comment down below and let us know what you think. I'm Jake. See you next time.